The anime begins with our protagonist Vil, who is a magicless student at a prestigious magical academy where a talent for magic is valued most. He has no aptitude for magic and wonders if there's any way for the talentless like him to advance the magic academy. He isn't sure, but Vil frequently goes sit dungeons to slay monsters so that he can get stronger even if he can't its magic. One day at the academy, that distracted Vil gets called to the front of the class. He is told to conjure a flame using a catalyst, but Vil trembles in fear because of his lack of magical talent. Of course, he fails to conjure anything and the entire class laughs at him. The instructor is really disappointed because this academy is very prestigious and it's embarrassing how Vil can even use the most basic magic. This makes it clear to the instructor why Vil said to only be an honor student when it comes to note-taking. He says that Vil is completely beyond help. Just then, a student named Sion conjures an amazing flame from his seat. Sion gives an insincere apology by saying that he was just helping Vil. The instructor puts out the flame and declares that this was an example of how in this world the supremacy of magic is absolute. Magic is strength and mages are their heroes. At the Academy of Students, talent for magic is how they earn a higher rank. However, a no-talent student that can't even use a bit of magic has no right to be at an academy that gives rise to powerful sages. After class, Sion mocks Vil for going into the dungeon again because he's just going there to take out a small fry and scrape up some credits. Some girl named Colette intervenes, but Sion can't understand why an honor student like her would defend such a nobody. Colette declares that Vil is the hardest worker she knows, and she refuses to let anyone insult her friend. Everyone is shocked to hear her speak this way, but Sion points out that it takes a lot more than hard work to become a Magia Vander. Vil stands no chance of becoming one, and Sion is done wasting his time with the no talent like Vil. Sion agrees with the instructor as he tells Vil to drop out of the academy, but Colette tells Sion to get lost already. Colette consoles Vil by pointing out that there's something wrong with their professor, but Vil can't blame him because he is right. Vil does there's some smooth talking and tells Colette that as long as he has a cutie like her by his side, then he doesn't care about anything else. Colette gets really flustered and Vil apologizes because he was tired of the young age to compliment girls. He says that her cuteness is completely objective though, and this just gets her even more flustered. Colette reminds herself that she is the heir to a noble and she must remain composed. Just then Colette becomes concerned because what has gone completely silent, and he explains that he's just admiring how nice of a day it is. Colette then explains that the Magia Vander, who are the most powerful wizards, continue to uphold the sky. Long ago, people were trapped in darkness and didn't even know about the existence of the sky. The world was being terrorized by something called the Celestial Host, but 5 wizards rose up against them. The wizards sent the invaders packing and they cast the seal over the sky while bringing peace to the world. The title Magia Vander is a title given only to the strongest, and it has been passed on for ages. When Vil was younger, some girl named Elfaria told him stories about what lies on the other side of the sky. There is said to be a beautiful sunset that turns all kinds of things bright red. She thought that if they could become Magia Vander, then they would be able to see the sunset. Vil wanted them to see you together, so they swore that they would. Vil realizes now that this was just a childish promise, that Elfaria was the real deal. She was an incredible talent and she became the youngest to ever earn the Magia Vander title. Because of this, she left to the top tower, and the telling this Vil was left behind. Vil is unable to give up on the promise they made, so he works hard so he can stand beside her one day. Afterwards, Vil is scolded by Professor Werkner for going to the dungeon again. The worst part is that Vil went to the 7th floor and Werkner fears that Vil lose his life one day. Vil apologizes and sheepishly asks about his credits, which just gets Werkner more upset. They eliminate an evil card in the dungeon though, so Werkner towards him with 2 credits. Vil cannot be any happier and Werkner shocked that he hasn't given up becoming a Magia Vander. Vil wonders what is so wrong about that, so Wagner explains the difficulties that lie ahead for him. Before heading to the tower, Vil will have to advance to the upper institute. To do that, Vil need to be proficient in the 3 curricula. The curricula are writing, spell work, and practice. Vil needs a ton of credits in all 3 of them, but Vil can't use magic and he will never be able to earn spell word credits. Vil knows this very well, which is why he focuses on collecting practice credits in the dungeon. Unfortunately, Werkner must remind Vil again that advancing through practice alone is impossible. Vil gets pretty dejected, so Werkner lifts his spirits by telling him to forget about becoming a Magia Vander. Instead, he needs to worry about actually graduating from the academy. Vil failed to earn credits in the most recent exam, which means he needs to earn 4 credits by the end of the week. There are only 2 days left, so Vil desperately searches his notes to find a monster worth 4 credits. Werkner wants to help him, but he doesn't want to get in trouble, so he says that he's simply talking to himself, and he reveals some report about a certain monster on the 6th floor of the dungeon. It's called the Baskerville, and it's exactly what Vil needs, so Vil thanks to helpful professor. Unfortunately, Sion heard everything. He comes up with an evil plan, and he assured that Vil finally get rid of the no-talent scrub, who is out of his league in this academy. A while later, we find Vil on the 6th floor of the dungeon. Vil has fought a Baskerville before, so he's eager to earn his 4 credits. He tells his worried cat friend not to worry because he will avoid the monster's flame breath, so they don't get burnt to a crisp like last time. Nearby, Scion and his cronies search for the monster. They want to take care of it before Vil does so that he will be expelled for being short on credits. Scion's buddies are worried about being on the 6th floor, but Scion reminds them that he is one of the elites at the school. Scion has some serious issues as the very sight of seeing Vil offends him. He doesn't even believe that a no-talent loser should even be able to speak about the Magia Vanders, and he thinks Vil doesn't deserve to be at the academy. Just then things take a horrifying turn as a monster utterly eviscerates one of Scion's men. This thing is terrifying as the kid's blood drops off its fists and Scion's friend screams in horror. Vil hears the scream and rushes forward as he fears that someone is being attacked. Vil demonstrates incredible speed and arrives to see Scion in battle. He is shocked to see that the monster is an evil sentinel because he has never seen one in person before. This beast is incredibly dangerous and it's worth 10 credits. This terrifying monster usually resides in the lower levels of the dungeon, so Vil wonders why it's there. The terrified Scion begs for the monster to stay away as he attacks it, but his magic isn't having any effect. Scion doesn't stand a chance and Vil realizes that the sentinel is on a whole other level. Scion desperately fires away, but the fearsome beast just keeps approaching, so Vil decides that he has to do something. However, just then Vil shocks himself as he wonders if he actually has any obligation to save Scion. Scion has done nothing but make fun of him and he has bullied Vil to no end. His mind is flooded with memories of how poorly Scion treated him, and he begins to think that leaving Scion behind to lose his life would be justified. However, Vil remembers something Elfaria told him. She said that he was kinder and braver than anyone she has ever met, and we see that she was the one that gave Vil his glasses. Back to the present. Vil says that Elfaria was wrong. He isn't kind or brave, he just wants to do whatever it takes to stand beside her. Vil puts on his battle glasses and dashes forward. He stops the monster's immense attack and declares that he will become a lone sword. Back at the school, Professor Edward urgently tells Werkner that Scion and his buddies went to the dungeon without permission. Werkner is in disbelief and Edward tells him to use his familiar to find Scion. The kids are in serious danger, so Werkner prepares to do so and asks what floor they're on. Edward explains that they went to the 6th floor and he is shocked when Werkner declares that if they went to the 6th floor then there's no need to worry. Edward reminds them how dangerous the 6th floor is, but Werkner explains everything is fine because that is the floor Vil is on. Back in the dungeon, Vil demonstrates to the insane fighting ability as defends off the sentinel and he manages to slice off one of its fingers. The infuriated beast tries to attack Vil, but the kid is just too fast. Vil chores around the cave and easily deflects the debris the monster throws at him. Eventually, Vil make it onto the monster's back and Scion watches in shock as he can't believe that this is the same Vil from school. The professors watch the fight from a crystal ball and Edward can't believe what he is seeing from Vil. Werkner then reveals that Vil is a true outlier. He has superhuman strength that mage would never possess and a body as tough as the dwarfs. That isn't all though, as he also has incredible observation skills that allow him to grasp an enemy's strategies after seeing them just once. Vil demonstrates this by dodging an attack the monster just used, and he uses this opening to slice his arm off. Werkner concedes that Vil cannot use magic, but in this world filled with magic users, Vil is the one and only warrior. Vil now takes a monster's giant sword, and as the beast becomes infuriated, Vil get ready for an attack. Scion hasn't moved an inch this entire time as he Istanbul Vil's strength. The monstrous beast unleashes a powerful beam attack, but Vil stops it with the sword. Werkner continues to explain how powerful Vil is by declaring that his slash of the sword surpasses even lightning. Vil shows it's just that as he slices right through the monster's beam, causing massive damage everywhere, and the monster's utterly defeated. Vil shows us concern for Scion, but Scion is so angry that he makes himself bleed from the mouth. Edward is just as upset as he refuses to believe that someone who can't use magic is able to surpass magic. A while later, Vil returned to the academy to find the very upset Werkner. Vil did manage to eliminate the sentinel though, so he officially awards Vil 10 credits. 5 years earlier, we see how terrible Vil felt. While everyone whispered behind his back, they had never heard of someone who couldn't use magic like him, and everyone wondered how he got into the magical academy. Everyone just assumed that he was used as bait to lure his friend Elfaria to the school. Elfaria had already become a Magia Vander at this point, so the other students assumed that he would be kicked from the academy. Vil went to meet with Headmaster Cauldron and she put a dagger in his hand. Without saying a word, she prepared an attack and Vil prepared to action. He pushed Werkner to safety, and before Werkner could even hit the ground, Vil neutralized the Headmaster's attack with just a dagger. Cauldron and Werner were absolutely stunned, so the headmaster could only laugh about Vil's amazing display of skill. Werner was then shocked when she declared that Vil will be allowed to continue attending the Magic Academy. Werner reminded her that Vil is unable to use magic, but Cauldron was extremely intrigued by Vil. He was like a sword that yearned to be a wand. Surprisingly, Vil still seemed unhappy. He just wanted to know if he would be able to ascend the tower if he kept studying at the academy, and if he became strong, would he be able to be with Elfaria. Cauldron gave him hope as she declared that if he remained undaunted and stood strong, he might be able to achieve his goal. After he left, Cauldron admitted that he had no clue how things would end for Vil, the sword attempting to become a wand. Back to the present, Werner lectured his students that what it means to ascend the tower. This generally means advancing to the upper institute to become one of the Magia Vander. To reign from the topmost floor like they do, a person must be recognized by the highest center of learning. There are two main ways to advance. One is by creating a new type of magic, and the other is by earning at least 7,200 credits at the academy. Only a very rare few have been able to create a new type of magic, which means that the majority of students rely on earning credits. Werner scolds all his students, though, because they're not even doing well enough to graduate, let alone reach the upper institute. After class, Colette sees how exhausted Vil is, and she brings up how everyone is talking about how tough Professor Werner's class was. Werner is especially tough on Vil, but Vil knows that it's because he has completely failed that spell work. Vil refuses to be deterred, however, because he believes that being a failure doesn't mean that he should and still work hard. Vil is grateful the Werner gives his students supplemental classes because some professors, my Professor Edward, don't seem to care. Just then the two overhear Sion's friends telling everyone that Sion defeated an evil sentinel all by himself. His friends admit to being overwhelmed by the beast, but when they woke up, Sion had slain the sentinel. Everyone thinks that Sion will become one of the top 3 at the school because of this, but Sion is furious because he knows what really happened. Sion spots Vil, so he rushes to him and angrily expresses his disbelief. Vil is supposed to be a talentless loser, but he was somehow able to fight really well. Colette breaks up the altercation, but Vil doesn't tell her anything about what happened. In the headmaster's office, the angry Edward demands that Vil be expelled. Cauldron points out that Vil is already in his 6th and final year at the school, and it would be cruel to expel him after he has come this far. Edward is furious, though, because he doesn't think the academy needs someone who is a warrior and not a mage. Being able to surpass magic without being able to use it is blasphemy to him. Cauldron checks Vil's grades and explains that he more than excels at everything other than magic, so much so that he will have several paths to choose from outside of being a Magia Vander. She declares that the academy has a responsibility to produce great scholars for something she calls the fated day. This just further emboldens Edward, so he explains that the issue is Vil is determined to become a Magia Vander. That fact is clear to everyone, so Cauldron sees this point and declares that Vil should be tested. Also, because Edward has learned Vil's secret, she instructs him to administer Vil's test personally. If Vil fails Edward's test, then she will entrust the matter of his expulsion to Edward. Even Edward is surprised by her decision, and he reminds her that he's not as lenient as Werner. Cauldron is not concerned, so she leaves the contents of the exam up to him, and Edward gets a sinister smile on his face as he leaves. When he leaves, though, we see the Cauldron is pretty confident, so she wants Edward to test Vil as hard as he can, so he can see the truth for himself. She believes that Edward is the best for the job because he understands the Magia Vander better than anyone, and that is why people call him the Dark Viper Mage. Elsewhere, Vil apologized to Colette because she always has to help him do magic things that he can't do himself, like opening his magic-locked locker. Colette doesn't mind, but she notices that he still keeps his sword in his locker. Vil explained that he has to because he has never been given permission to carry it on campus. At the study hall, Vil writes a report about one of his favorite battles. Dwarves were raised from another world, and they were severely mistreated. They were overworked and even treated worse than the elves. Because of this, they raised an army and waged the war. Colette wishes he would have worked so hard, but Vil explains that if he loses even just 1 credit, he won't be able to advance to the upper institute. This report isn't too bad, though, because he can understand how the dwarves felt. This is because even in the face of the mightiest magic, they continue to fight. They never gave up, and such determination is what Vil believes is necessary to overcome magic. Professor Werner taught him this saying, and it's just another reason why Vil must do his best. Colette then notices that Vil has a white hair. He rejects her offer to pull it out, but she insists. Just then Edward interrupts them and instructs Vil to come with him to the spell hall. Edward explains that he cannot Vil to continue failing spell work, so he has decided to give him a supplemental lesson. Vil is shocked and Edward tells them to be grateful. He declares that he will ascertain Vil's worth himself, but Vil is shocked when Edward uses a magic attack against him. Edward simply explains that Vil's assignment is to land a single strike on him, and refusal is not an option. However, if Vil succeeds, then he will reward Vil with his first ever spell work credits. Vil is done by the opportunity to receive 5 spell work credits, but Edward reveals that if Vil fails, then he will be expelled from the academy. Edward prepares his next attack and declares that those without talent should not be permitted to even look at the Magia Vander. Edward has given Vil a reason to fight, so he decides that it's time to begin and he unleashes the attack. Back in the headmaster's office, Cauldron reveals the Workner what she has done. She tells the shocked Workner that Edward is conducting a test, and he's forbidden from interfering. Cauldron has recognized Workner's advocacy for Vil, but she must also recognize Edward's concerns. She has already decided that Edward will ascertain whether Vil is worthy of attempting to become a Magia Vander. Workner struggles with how cruel her choice is though, because Edward is the closest person to becoming a Magia Vander. Edward was ultimately defeated before, but he's still an ascendant. He has reached the top of the tower before. Edward demonstrates his fearsome abilities now, and Vil is shocked that he was able to generate so much power by only using a low-level dark magic spell. Vil is no slouch though, and he shows his incredible speed, but his kick has stopped and Vil realizes that Edward's defense is impregnable. Edward mocks Vil for kicking a magical shield and he calls him hopeless. Vil is knocked back by a powerful attack and he's stunned to see that Edward is casting spells with no incantations. They activate instantly and there's no hole in Edward's offense or defense. Things aren't looking too good for Vil as he realizes that he can't even scratch Edward, and we see that Vil's familiar named Kiki runs off. The confident Edward announces that the only magic he will use are his black flames to burn Vil and his shield to repel Vil's poultry attacks. Edward prepares his next attack and Vil is horrified to see that he's overlapping a single spell. The attack was extremely powerful the first time, but now he's going to unleash a barrage of them. Edward declares that the talent list needs to disappear and he unleashes the attack. The attack is impossible to escape, so Vil is struck several times as Edward demonstrates immense control of his magic. Vil is in really bad shape now and he begins to realize that he can't beat Edward. He is shocked to see what a top-tier mage looks like and Vil wishes that he had his sword. Nearby, Colette worries Vil after hearing that he was going to have supplemental lessons with Edward. She fears the worst, but she's surprised when she sees who's familiar. Kiki is injured, but she so scratches at Vil's locker and Colette realizes that something bad has happened to Vil. Kiki is clearly distressed, so Colette urgently opens Vil's locker. Back with Vil, Edward points out that if he can't handle someone like him, then Vil has no chance of ever becoming a Magia Vander. Edward then brings up the war involving the dwarves and explains that they foolishly incited a rebellion with the force of 10,000 dwarves. He then asks Vil if he knows how many mages it took to end the battle. Vil tries to get up, but Edward forces him down and angrily reveals that it only took one mage. With the simple wave of his wand, a single mage was able to annihilate 10,000 dwarven warriors. Edward angrily declares that this is the way of the world and the sword will never reach wand. He wants Vil to abandon his aspirations, but Vil refuses and proudly announces that he wants to reach the Magia Vander. Edward pushes him away and demands to know what drives Vil to fight so hard. Just then Vil stands defiantly and declares that he wants to be with the person he loves. This answer shocks Edward to his core and Vil continues by saying that he wants to keep the promise he made with Elfaria. Edward is disgusted and refuses to believe that something as simple as love is what is pushing Vil to reach for the apex of magic. Vil understands how foolish it must seem to Edward, but he doesn't care how difficult the path will be. He is determined to see the sunset with Elfaria. Just then Colette arrives at the perfect moment and she gives Vil his sword. Vil thanks her and gets ready for a real fight. Edward calls Vil a deviant and points out that he cannot win with the sword. Edward promises that he will defeat Vil as he unleashes another attack, but he is stunned when Vil slices right through his magic. This makes it clear that he's using a Moria blade, but Edward doesn't care and launches another attack. Vil thinks about how terrified he is, as you can tell that Edward is going to launch another barrage. This is because it's a terrifying volley of 1,000 flames. Vil can't stop his legs from shaking as he acknowledges that Edward is a powerful barrier between him and the Magia Vander. Vil really wants to run away, but he knows that this is the only way through the barrier. Edward declares that the fight is over as he sends out his barrage of magic attacks, and Colette calls out to the charging Vil. Vil masterfully maneuvers through the attacks and thinks about how there's actually more to the story about the Dwarven War. There was a brave Dwarven in general named Gareth that fought even as he lost all his comrades. In spite of everything going on around him, he was able to land a single blow. After the battle and honor of his bravery, that mage is recognized the dwarf's status. Just then Vil launches a brick at Edward's barrier and it shatters everywhere. Vil then takes to the skies. He declares that the Dwarven story is an example of a sword seeing a wand and reaching it. Vil uses the ceiling as a launching pad and he sends himself right through Edward's barrier by slicing through it. The battles then reaches its dramatic conclusion as both fighters point their weapons at each other. Edward is then stunned and furious when he realizes that Vil cut him. He walks away, but he also declares that Vil is rewarded 5 credits. Colette runs out to check on Vil, but he's completely exhausted. Cauldron is very impressed with Vil, and Werkner points out that Vil chose to dive straight into Edward's barrage. He hit himself and attacked from a blind spot overhead. That is an although, as Cauldron points out that Vil used the strict powerful enough to break through Edward's shield. Vil managed to use a slashing attack capable of overcoming magic, and in her amazement, Cauldron declares that wish truly as if Vil was undaunted. Another look back shows Vil receiving his glasses from Elfaria. This is when she said her final goodbye, and Vil declared that he would make it to the tower too. Even if he can't use magic and even if everything tried to tear them apart, Vil vowed to come for her no matter what. Elfaria was shocked when he said that they would see the sunset together, and she promised to wait for him no matter how long it takes. Werkner watched them part ways, and Vil told them that this would be the last time that he cried like a pathetic and hopeless loser. Back to the present, Vil described himself as a no-talent and a book learner, who only excels in writing. Vil is a student, but he's also a hard worker. Just then Vil trips, but he demonstrates amazing speed and coordination as he easily catches all his fallen newspapers. Elfaria is in the news for her amazing achievement of creating new original magic. In fact, she's the first to achieve the remarkable feat of inventing 12 magics. Vil is of course proud, and he vows to work hard too. He is shocked, though, when he reads Elfaria has sent down an order. Vil rushes to his friend Rosti and begs him to make magical items for him. Vil urgently gets ready and explains everything to Rosti. The order is to collect Frostwalker ice cores because Elfaria needs a lot of magic catalysts. Because of all this, contributing students will be compensated. The target is on the 4th floor of the dungeon, so what begs Rosti for some magic items. Rosti is a good friend and explains that he already made improvements to the previous version of a magic item. Rosti hands over the new version and Vil thanks to his buddy. Rosti always looking out for Vil though, so he makes sure he eats something and reminds him to take care of himself. Shortly after, Vil arrives at the 4th floor of the dungeon. There he finds a ton of students, but he expected this because in order from Elfaria is very important. Vil eagerly tells Kiki that it's time to get started, but he's startled when the ground shakes. They shake was caused by Scion as he eviscerated some Frostwalkers, and Scion's friends cheer him on. Scion isn't satisfied with destroying weaklings like this though, because he's still upset about how strong Vil was when he saved him. Vil on the other hand is very impressed by Scion and determines that he must hurry because at this rate there won't be any Frostwalkers left to hunt. This area is pretty crowded though, so Vil has no choice but to go deeper into the dungeon. Vil ends up finding a girl in danger, so he rescues her. The girl is stunned because Vil doesn't use any magic and he simply destroyed the monsters with the sword. The girl thanks him for saving her and introduces herself as Iris. Back at the academy, Professor Werner explains that creating new magic is a profound achievement, one so grand that it guarantees unconditional advancement to the tower. Magic usually takes on the name of the person that created it, and in the case of the dark magic spell Dax Darbicans, its namesake is a maid from ancient times, Fire Watchman Darbicans. This means that a foreign of his students comes up with some new magic, then they can carve their name into history. A student wonders, is Elfaria really as good as the news says, and Werkner agrees that she's unbelievably good. Authoring 12 original spells is unheard of, so she is one of the greatest magers in history. Colette can't believe that Elfaria is Vil's childhood friend, and Elfaria even has the entire school in an uproar after issuing an order. Colette's friends named Rose teases her because she's obviously jealous, and she says that Colette must be afraid that Elfaria is going to steal Vil away from her. Colette denies it, but Werkner scolds them for being too loud. Colette takes a moment to think about Vil, and she wonders if he's in the dungeon again because of Elfaria. Vil is, of course, and Iris says she recognizes him as the magicless kid from school that has no talent. Vil wonders why she doesn't have any disdain towards him for being talentless, but Iris says that she can't look down on the person that saved her. She knows that he can't use magic, but she respects people that have their own gifts. Vil can tell that she's a good person, and she declares that she wants to become a Magia Vander, one of the people holding up the sky. Vil then explains to us that no one knows the real sky, and even now the world is hidden. The remarkable magical energies of the Magia Vander cloak everything, creating a false sky and the Great Barrier. Legend says that when the barrier falls, the world will once again be enveloped in darkness and the calamity will begin. Students strive to meet orders because they believe that will help support this guy. Just then Iris reveals that she actually met Elfaria before. Iris was alone in the dungeon and ended up running into trouble. This is pretty similar to how Vil met Iris, so he assumes that she gets into a lot of trouble. Iris describes how she was surrounded by monsters and her life began to flash before her eyes. The next thing she knew, Elfaria was standing before her after freezing all the monsters. It's a really fond memory for Iris, and she vows to do her best for Elfaria. That's why she came to the dungeon today, but she feared that all the other students have already taken out all the frost walkers. She isn't able to pick up any of them with search magic, but she notices that Vil is doing something on his own. He explains that when frost walkers move daily voice fragments behind. However, the ones he's finding are more than double the size of normal fragments. This makes him confident that there's a really powerful frost walker up ahead. Iris is shocked by how he can know all this without magic, so Vil explains how what magic is great, but it's not absolute. Vil has some knowledge and wisdom, and he declares that experience can make up for the rest. Vil gears up as he prepares for battle, and Iris is stunned when the giant frost walker appears. Vil used this as amazing speed to keep her from getting crushed, and Iris is terrified to see that the monster is actually what they call a frost rex. Just as Vil predicted, it's a really powerful monster, and it shows how terrifying it is with a loud roar. Frost rexes are the highest form of frost walker, and it's worth 6 credits. It's also a special monster that is specific to the 4th floor. Just then both must dodge its beam attack, and the beam turns everything it touches into ice. Vil tells Iris to wait while he fights, but she's worried about him and explains that physical attacks won't work on a frost rex. Anything that touches it freezes instantly, so close combat is a terrible idea. The only way to deal with one of these monsters is long-range magic attacks, so Iris begs Vil not to fight. Vil confidently tells her not to worry though, and he explains that he has fought monsters like this plenty of times. Vil prepares the magic items his friend made him, and he takes to the sky. He dodges the monster's attacks and maneuvers through the battlefield. The frost rex loses sight of him, so it attacks in every direction, forcing Iris to take cover. Vil gets into position and launches the magic items onto the monster. The items latch onto the beast, and they're attached to a rope. The beast tries to hit Vil with its beam, but it's no use as Vil is already on the move again. Vil uses his insane speed to avoid getting attacked, and he wraps the rope all around the beast. The frost rex keeps trying to attack, but Vil has already finished covering it in rope, and he thinks about how frost rex monsters are weak against fire and explosive attacks. The frost rex uses its most powerful attack to freeze everything in the surrounding area, and it begins to turn Vil into ice. It's too late though, as Vil's preparations are complete. He uses the device on his wrist to create a flame, and he ignites the rope. The fire makes its way all around the monster and causes the magic items to explode. The blast is incredibly powerful, and when it finishes, there's barely anything left of the frost rex. Vil credits Rosti for making such great magic items, and he plans to thank his buddy later. Iris is in awe of him, but her demeanor quickly changes to something much more serious. Vil is known for having no talent, so what she just witnessed doesn't make any sense to her. Vil is nothing like the rumors say, so she thinks about how she will have to report this back to a certain someone. Just then Vil says that they have plenty of ice cores, and Iris goes back to being her other self, and she agrees that it's time to get out of the dungeon. When alone, Iris shows her true self, and she thinks about how impressive Vil was when he used creativity to compensate for not being able to use magic. He also has a nose for battle that is backed by experience. She determines that while he's no mage, he's definitely a powerful warrior. Just then Iris actually meets with Magia Vander. They were having a meeting about how they needed more promising seedlings for the fated day because they cannot allow what was written in the Lord come to pass. Iris is known as the launcher, and they ask her if she found anything useful. Iris reveals that she found one interesting prospect, a magicless warrior named Vil, who she now recommends for a position in the tower. Some Magia Vander thinks it's a terrible idea, but the white-haired guy named Zio thinks it would be interesting. Some of them assume that we would be inferior to them, but Zio says he would accept anyone as long as they are useful. Eleanor calls him a barbarian, but a guy named Cariot stopped him from fighting. He points out that the Grandmaster Festival is coming up and they can just wait to make a decision about Vil until after they see those results. The Magia Vander agrees that useful students will be revealed during the festival and they begin to leave. Elfaria stays behind and she once again promises to wait for Vil. A while later, we watch as students are tested and we learned that a student needs at least 7,000 credits to advance to the Upper Institute. This is also an absolute condition for becoming a Magia Vander. Students engage in combat with some sentinel-looking things and Colette shows off her fighting ability. Scion does as well by destroying a golem, and it is announced that they both pass the exam. Colette now has 7,340 credits and Scion has 9,889. Vil fight the golem as well, but he is mocked for trying to punch it instead of using magic. Vil gets distracted by some students and he's eventually defeated. This only makes the mockery worse, as students talk about how he can't use magic and he can't even scratch a golem. A couple of students that amaze everyone with their abilities. The girl is named Lahanna Owenzaz and the guy is Wignall Linder. Their magic is very impressive and they easily defeat a golem. They both pass the exam and each of them now have a total of 10,100 and 10,075 credits. Another guy steps forward and uses some ice magic to attach some ice crystals to several golems. These shards turn into ice flowers and the guy easily freezes several of these golems. This guy's name is Julius Reinberg and the other students are amazed that he even froze their golems. Julius passes the exam like the other top students, but he has 10,048 credits. Julius declares war on the other top students and they use their abilities to destroy his ice flower as they accept his challenge. All the other students are in awe of the three of them because it's already confirmed that they're going to the Upper Institute. They are also the only ones with credits over 10,000. Credits are used to measure students' potential, but Vil doesn't have enough of them to graduate, let alone advance to the Upper Institute. This is Vil's last year at the school, and he only has 5,405 credits. Julius insults Vil and instructs him to never be in his presence ever again. Julius's friends grace him up way too much, and they're sure that he will be scouted at the upcoming Grand Magical Festival. Vil overhears them, and he can't believe that it's already time for the festival again. At lunch, Colette tells Vil that his only option is to get scouted at the festival. This is because advancing to the Upper Institute on writing and practice alone isn't realistic. He has less than the required 7,000, but there's still a chance that he can scouted so he can ascend the tower. Vil agrees with her, but she isn't the only one with this idea. All the other students are trying to turn things around for themselves and they will be out for blood during the festival. The Grand Magic Festival is held every 2 years. Several competitions will take place and high mages will come down from the tower scouts. It's a contest between students from different tower factions and there are quite a few of them. Colette is sure that if one of those factions chooses Vil, then he will surely be admitted as a tower member. Vil knows that this hardly ever happens though, and he would have to perform some kind of magic that would put a high mage to shame. That isn't although, as Colette explains, that there are people called Watchers that appear to snitch about standing talents and carry them off to the tower. Vil has heard of these Watchers, but he points out that they're just one of the Academy's 7 legends. Vil doesn't think that a no-talent like him should try to stand out at the festival, so he just plans to help with operation. Colette thinks this is a chance for him to change the way people see him, but Vil reminds her that people didn't like how he competed during the last festival 2 years ago. This festival went down as the worst one in history, and Vil says that he stood out for all the wrong reasons. Outside, everyone practices their magic, and it starts to feel like the festival really is drawing near. Luckily for Vil, scouts from other capitals will be coming, so even if he can't ascend the tower, there are other paths he can take. The festival is a great way for students to show what they are capable of. This is why Colette wants Will to participate, but he points out that he can't even use magic. Just then, Colette notices that a barrier has been placed on a nearby locker. Colette is pretty sure that she can break the powerful spell, but she uses Kiki to quietly remove it. Opening the locker reveals a hidden stairway, and they decide to explore. Down below, they find some students betting on who will win certain events at the festival. This is underground gambling, and students are placing their bets on the top students. Vil checks to see Scion there, and Colette proactively keeps Scion from starting trouble. She warns him not to get violent, and Vil wonders what Scion is doing there. Scion doesn't answer, but his dumb friends say that it's not like he's trying to see what the betting odds are because there are rumors that there's a huge spread between him and the top students. Scion loudly schools his dumb friends and Colette mocks him for being worried about the top students. Scion of course denies it and points out that the number of credits he lags behind them are just credits he lost in writing exams. Scion is sure that he's just as strong as the top students, but he remembers that he doesn't have to explain himself to Vil. The next day, Colette offers to go with Will to the dungeon, but he explains that he's going to work at the tavern. This tavern is on the outskirts of the capital of magic and it's on Slumland Street. This place is filled with dwarves and Vil works there as a server. Vil speaks to the guy he sees when delivering papers and this guy can't believe how hard of a worker Vil is. Vil delivers his papers in the morning, attends the academy during the day and then works tavern at night. Vil explains that he doesn't have a scholarship so he needs to work hard to pay his tuition. The old guy thinks that the Grand Magic Festival can fix everything for Vil, but Vil says he could never enter it. Vil has scolded for slacking off and his boss points out that Rosti is working much harder. Vil apologizes for needing his help work, but Rosti doesn't mind since he enjoys the challenge of having to work without magic. One of the servers quits so Rosti helping Will at the last second. The place gets even more lively and all the dwarves show how well Vil gets along with everyone. Later, Rosti wonders why Vil doesn't just has Workner to find him a better paying job. Vil explains that he causes enough trouble for Workner as it is and he doesn't mind working for the dwarves. They are hardy people that will respect a lot and they welcome them in with open arms. Just then Vil drops the spoon and as he reaches for it Julius enters the place. Julius insults the gross-looking tavern and he mocks Vil for working there. He thinks it's a good fit though, since it's only right for a no-telling like Vil to serve barbaric dwarves. The old dwarf is insulted and Julius wonders what the look in his eyes is. Julius reminds him that they are an inferior race that emigrated here from another world. He tells them to know their place and he takes a seat. The dwarven world was destroyed by the celestial host a long time ago and the dwarves escaped to this world. Julius continues to insult the tavern and he demands that he be served. Unlike the elves, dwarves are treated with disdain and if the dwarves forever to lay hands on a mage, their standing would instantly be in danger. Tensions rise as the old dwarf is clearly upset and Rosti brings some food to Julius. Julius and his friends insult the food as well as they think that it would only taste good to a barbarian. Julius calls the dwarves filthy beasts and told them all to get out of his country. The rude bunch has a good laugh but Rosti notices that Vil has gotten very serious. Julius and his buddies think that Vil there to wait on them but Vil demand that they take back everything they said. Julius is annoyed by him, but Vil explains that there's actually a lot of meaning behind the dwarven food. Vil declares that it's not something that should be mocked and everyone watches in shock. Julius rudely points out that none of them can use magic and explains that if something is disgusting, he will call it disgusting. Julius then kicks the food right onto Vil and his friends tells Vil not to get any ideas about fighting back. These idiots just mess with the wrong guy though and Vil instantly drops both of Julius's friends. Vil knocks them into unconsciousness with just one move and he tells Julius that the savagery between them is more senseless than that of the dwarves. Julius becomes furious and explains that he hasn't faced humiliation like this in a really long time. Julius's rage shows his power as the room begins to freeze over. He warns Vil that he just picked a fight with the worst possible person and Vil just barely manages to dodge Julius's dangerous attack. Things get more intense and Julius manages to pin Vil against the wall. Julius then uses his wand to taunt Vil by pushing one of his ice flowers, but he is shocked to see that Vil is still defiant. Julius decides that encasing really nice won't be enough to appease him because no one is here to see it. He demands that Vil enter the Grand Magical Festival so he can humiliate him in front of everyone. Vil destroys some of Julius's ice and declares that he will enter the festival. The old dwarf tries to stop the Vil, but Rosti can tell that it's far too late because Vil is really angry now. Julius declares that he will defeat Vil and make sure that he will no longer be able to stay at the academy. Vil has had enough of this guy and told him that he will have to apologize to his friends once he beats him. A while later, the headmaster gives a short speech and announces the start of the Grand Magic Festival. Fire faction scouts are told to keep their eyes peeled so they can find a diamond in the rough among all the participants. Spectators and watches participants ride on Charizards during one of the matches. Spectators are amazed by the intense race, but it's pretty clear to them that Lahanna is going to win. This expected from the one they called Miss Perfect because she stands at the top of the schools. Headmaster Cauldron observes the crowd and is glad to see that scouts are mixed into the crowd with their eyes gleaming. Iris points out that mages coming from outside the tower always creates some tension. The scouts are now having their own competition to find the academy's most promising students. Lahanna, of course, wins the sky race in record time, and it's her second time winning in a row. Iris says she has to leave for now as she has work she must tend to. Iris then changes to her other persona to say that there is a certain person she has to cheer for. Nearby, Sion prepares for his match and thinks about how he can't let down a girl in need. A look back shows Colette asking him for help even though she hated it. Colette asked him to join her team and Sion accepted. Sion now rushes to meet with her, and he thinks about how Colette must have finally realized that he's a better partner than Vil. Sion is then of course shocked to see that Vil is actually part of their team as well. In order to participate in the festival's crown attack match, each team must have at least 21,000 combine credits. So if Vil to compete, their only option was to invite Sion. Sion refuses to help a no-talent, and he wonders why Vil is trying to enter upper-level event in the first place. Just then Sion felt shivers down his spine as Julius enters the room. Vil gives a cold stare and Sion realizes that it isn't meant for him. Colette then reveals to Sion that something happened between Julius and Vil. Julius entered the crown attack match, so Vil decided that he had to face off against him no matter what. Sion is furious because not only did Vil humiliate him in the dungeon, he is now looking right past him. The festival continues outside, and the two announcers will be some guy named Mike and the #1 most hated Professor Edward. Mike complains about having to work with Edward, but he takes aback after Edward shows how terrifying he can be. It is then announced that the crown attack match is next and some elves prepare the field. They recite an incantation that causes giant magic circles to form everywhere, and their combined power changes the entire landscape around the stadium. Unlike the other events, Crown Attack is a team competition held between 3-man teams. Teams start at the outer edge of the field and make their way to the central stadium. At the center of the stadium is a crown, and the first to take it wins. Aside from naturally occurring obstacles from nature, participants will have to avoid tons of traps arranged by the professors at the school. Smashing through the shortest path is allowed, and so is obstructing their teams. We then learned that out of all the events at the festival, the current attack is the most brutal and heated. Edward gives some commentary, but Mike interrupts and points out that this will be a great test for their brilliant students. Mike has heard that the secret gambling halls heavily favored Wignall and Julius squads as the winners. Vil's team is the least popular because Vil is a no-talent and the crowd laughed at him for entering the crown attack. Squads begin heading out, but Werkner, shocked to see that Vil is participating. He tries to convince Vil to back out, but Vil apologizes and explains that even if it makes him a laughingstock, this is about he wants to win. All squads are in place and the crown attack begins. Julius's team is the first to reach a trap, and it shockingly ends up being a large group of golems. It's a large-scale obstacle and spectators wonder if they will even survive. Just then, everyone is stunned, as Vil sprint right towards the golems. The crowd mocks him though because he could barely even scratch just one of these golems during the exam, and they assume that he's just running to the end of his life. They don't know that Vil's team is well prepared, and Vil instruct Colette to do what they planned. Colette uses earth magic to cover Vil's arm in stone, and he absolutely destroys one of these golems. This causes a large burst of energy to be emitted inside the stadium, and the entire crowd is a loss for words. Sion is in disbelief as Vil continues his barrage of attacks, and Mike declares that the first to make it past the gauntlet of golems is the no-talent Vil. Sion could never forgive himself for being saved by a guy like Vil, so he did everything he could do to get stronger. Vil is still somehow outshining him, which makes Sion furious. Vil's team has taken the lead, but this means that they're the first to encounter in the next trap. Vil uses his immense strength to block some rocks, and Colette uses magic to summon several swords across the battlefield. Vil then masterfully uses these swords to destroy all the traps surrounding them. One of these traps remains, but Vil quickly destroys it as well. Mike announces that they have passed the second trap, and he is in awe of this dark horse that Vil's team has proven to be. The crowd refuses to believe that Vil's behind these amazing feats, and they assume that it's all because of Colette magic. The scouts know better though, as they can tell that Vil has an elite ability to detect and counter the traps. Edward chimes in to point out that Vil's movements are that of someone who spends all their time in the dungeon. Edward praises Vil for his knowledge and experience, while also commending his incredible reflexes. The crowd is still skeptical, but Irish crews Vil on anyway. One team refuses to fall behind Vil's, but they just end up falling to a trap of wild plants. Everyone tries their best to advance, but the traps are merciless. Vil's team has a commanding lead, so Mike wonders if the no-talent Vil will really be the first to reach the stadium. Nearby, Julius hears the commotion farming from the stadium, so he wonders what's going on. He has just finished destroying a trap, and his team informs him that Vil is in the lead. They fear that Vil is going to win, but Julius isn't worried one bit and he tells his team that he will handle it. A short while later, Mike announces that Vwil's team has reached the final area called the Enchanted Woods. Here Vwil is met by a chain circle trap, but he just uses a sword to cut the circles out, so they get aimed at each other. The circles destroy each other and Mike's is awe how unfazed Vwil is. Edward was the one that set up the minefield of magic, so he doesn't have any comments about Vwil passing it. Vwil the charges forward, but he knows that the closer they get to the stadium, the more likely it will be for them to encounter other teams. This means that the real fight between them will take place in the Sea of Trees. Vwil's team is in the lead, so he decides to set up an ambush and wait for Julius. However, just then Vwil is nearly impaled by a shard of ice. Colette is shocked to see that Julius somehow got there before them, and Vwil wonders if his team is hiding somewhere. Julius then attacks with the barrage of ice shards, so Vwil remind themselves to focus. Vwil prepares to attack, but everyone is stunned when Scion whips away all the ice with his flames. Scion begins incantation, and Colette can tell how dangerous it will be, so she begs for Vwil to get away. It's too late though, as Scion angrily finishes preparing his attack, and Colette must quickly protect Vwil from getting hit by it. The attack causes massive damage, and the shockwave from it can be felt even at the stadium. Vwil has no clue what just happened, and he's horrified by the damage that the attack caused. Scion tells Julius to leave as he's just in the way, and Colette realizes that Scion was aiming for both Julius and Vwil. Scion explains that he has played nice up until this point, but now it's time for him to get his due. Scion demands that Vwil fight him, but Vwil is absolutely stunned. Vwil wants to know why Scion is so upset, but Scion just tells him that he doesn't need a reason to crush him. Colette tries to stop Scion, but Julius holds her movement with the wall of ice. Vwil becomes concerned when Julius attacks her, but he must have found himself against Scion. Scion's attacks disarm Vwil, so Vwil try to remind him that this is no time for them to be fighting each other. Scion refuses to listen though, and he just tells Vwil to pick up his sword. Vwil sees that he has no other choice, so he lifts his sword and prepares for battle. We then get a look at the past from Scion's perspective. Scion was disgusted by just the sight of Vwil because he has always been a pathetic no talent. Scion couldn't bear to look at him every day, so he decided to take it upon himself and make Vwil less painful to look at. Scion removed the mean note someone put on his back, and told Vwil that he would allow him to be his underling. Scion became upset when Vwil ignored him, but he quickly saw how emotionless Vwil had become. Vwil coldly told Scion to get away from him, and Scion has despised Vwil since that day. Back to the present, Vwil run for cover as Scion unleashes his flurry of attacks. Scion demonstrates the immense control he has over fire, as he manages to grab Vwil with it. Vwil breaks free, but Scion just keeps on attacking. Scion then insults Vwil for just jumping around like a wild animal who's only concerned about survival. He demands for Vwil to attack him back, but Vwil refuses. Scion continues to demand it of him, but Vwil tries to point out that they're on the same team. What's most important though is that Vwil wants to keep his promise to the dwarves, so he can't be bothered to fight Scion right now. This of course just upsets Scion even more, and Vwil begin to wonder if fighting Scion is really his only choice. Mike and the audience are shocked to see the teammates fighting each other, and Mike turns to Edward to hear his take on the situation. Edward says that fighting amongst team members is out of the question regardless of the reason. Not only will it ruin their chances of winning the match, it will also look really bad to the people scouting them. Edward calls it truly deplorable, but Mike is stunned to see how happy Edward looks while saying that. The scouts are disappointed because Scion showed a lot of promise in terms of his grades, but his behavior during the match makes them realize that he's still just a schoolboy. Rosti is worried about Vwil, and Iris comes out of nowhere to introduce herself. Iris calls herself the person that can get along with anyone, and she continues cheering for Vwil. Rosti didn't think that Iris was the type to cheer for someone, so Iris explained that she wasn't really interested in Vwil when she first heard about him. After meeting him, though she considers herself to be blessed, Rosti sees that there are a lot of people that seem to care about Vwil, and that includes Colette. Back at the fight, Colette determines that she has to hurry up and stop Vwil and Scion from fighting. Julius antagonizes her though, and she must defend herself from his attacks. Julius is a sneaky guy, so Colette realizes that he used that attack as a diversion, and he sets off a trap beneath her. And everyone in the Colosseum is stunned when they see that there are several Julie uses all over the battlefield. Julius has intercepted all the other teams as well, and Wignall is impressed, and he was able to go through with his declaration of war. Julia says that he will destroy him with his secret weapon, but he is shocked when Wignall reveals that he was waiting to return his flower to him. This flower destroys Julius, but it was just a clone, and Wignall is impressive to see that Julius had a trick like this up his sleeve. It's to be expected so, since Julius has the potential to become a Magia Vander. Mike loses his mind as he can't even explain what's going on, but he credits Wignall for shutting down Julius. A scout from the elf faction assesses the situation, but she just considers Wignall to be average. He neither exceeds nor fails to meet expectations. This lady named Chalia is a serious introvert though, so she wants to rush back home before she dies from being at this huge event. Everyone else in the stadium wonders if the winner of the competition will come down to Julius and Wignall. Vwill's team was really close, but they ruined their chances by fighting each other. Sion's friends know that Sion hates Vwill, but throwing the match because of it is not like him. Sion is going too far by trying to get Vwill kicked out of the academy, but one of his friends thinks that Sion has a good reason. Another look back shows Vwill getting bullied relentlessly, and he wondered where everyone enjoyed tormenting him so much. His classmates all thought so little of him, but Vwill knew better than anyone what a failure he was. Vwill knew would be too selfish to wish for them to just accept him, so at the very least, he just wanted them to leave him alone. This was Vwill's mindset when he rejected Sion's offer to take him under his wing. With everyone tormenting him, Vwill decided that above everything else he needed to focus on making it to Elfaria. Just like back then, Sion attacks Vwill and he angrily begins another incantation. This allows Sion to summon a falcon made of flames, and Vwill wonders if it's a guardian. This guardian nearly destroys Vwill, but he masterfully dodges while cutting off one of its wings, and he uses the opportunity to go after Sion. Unfortunately, the Firebird has high-speed regeneration, so Vwill will have to destroy its core. Guardians are usually used to defend while its user casts a spell, but this Firebird is attacking from all directions. The battle intensifies and it begins to take a serious toll on both fighters. No one is more shocked than Edward as he realizes that Sion has surpassed the student level. Not only can he use a high-level fire spell, he even summoned the Guardian. Having such precise magic control is incredible, and the Fire faction scouts have taken notice as well. Their reports say the Sion has a lot of potential, but he still falls behind Lahanna and the rest of the top three. Him always being counted out just makes them realize that Sion has a serious chip on his shoulder, and that is why you can never tell which students will have hidden potential. The head scout tells the others to report back to their leader because this festival has a surprisingly good group of students. Vwill is completely exhausted at this point, and he acknowledges that Sion has gotten a lot stronger. Sion is still filled with rage as he points out that Vwill is a much better fighter when he defeated the evil sentinel. Vwill once again tries to explain that there's no reason for them to be fighting, but Sion just gets more upset. Sion reminds Vwill of all the ridicule and embarrassment that he caused, and he wonders why Vwill doesn't resent him. Vwill becomes upset too now, as he reveals that he does resent Sion. Vwill has imagined getting back at him over and over again, but right now Vwill is determined to defeat Julius. Sion hardly listens to him and expresses how infuriated he gets any time Vwill refuses to give up, even though he's just a no talent. To make things worse, Vwill always seems to look everywhere, but he always ignores him. Vwill is then shocked when Sion demands that he look at him. Sion has head enough, so he declared that he will end Vwill's life if he keeps ignoring him. Vwill is stunned to hear what Sion really thinks of him, and he realizes that while he always thought it would be too selfish to ask for people to accept him, it's actually what he needed. Sion is clearly offering to acknowledge him, so Vwill decides that he will have to meet his challenge with everything he has. Sion is glad to see that Vwill is finally getting serious, so he begins another spell. Vwill focuses on this fight and prepares the time Sion's magic so he can go for a counterattack. Vwill is shocked, however, when he sees that Sion is using wide-scale destruction magic while also sending out his Guardian. This combined attack is incredibly dangerous, but Vwill has already mapped out its path. He skillfully makes his way through the attack, and Sion is shocked when Vwill slices right through the core of the bird. The battle reaches its climax, as both fighters prepared their most powerful attack, but Colette comes out of nowhere to stop them in their tracks. Colette looks pretty tattered up, so she explains that she hooped Julie's butt and he just disappeared. Sion freaks out after seeing how messed up her shirt is, and he reminds her that she's a daughter of a noble. Colette blames the guys for fighting in the first place, and she reminds Vwill that he has a score to settle with Julius, She declares that she will handle things from here so Vil can go after Julius. Sion angrily says that he won't let anyone get in his way, but Colette just starts yelling at him for ruining Vil's chance at looking good to the scouts. Vil calms her down with a compliment, and he told Sion that they can continue their fight another time as he leaves. This of course doesn't go well with Sion, and he demands that they fight now. Back with Mike, he announces that the lead teams will soon enter the stadium. Everyone wonders who will be the first to appear, and we see that Julius and his buddies are making their way through the gate. They make their way inside and everyone celebrates, as Mike declares that there's no one else there to stop them. However, just then Vil skies over the entire crowd and makes a forceful entrance by crashing into the ground behind Julius. Vil declares that he's there to challenge Julius, and Julius is clearly ready. Up in the magic tower, Elfaria peacefully sitting by the window when her assistant Sarisa walks into the room. At first Sarisa apologizes for intruding on Elfaria's meditation, but then she realizes Elfaria is just sleeping, so she smacks her across the head. Elfaria wakes up and complains that Sarisa didn't need to hit her that hard, but Sarisa tells her that she should take her status as a Magia Vander more seriously. It's a massively important role, yet Elfaria spends most of her time either sleeping or watching the world down below. Elfaria asks Sarisa why she came here, so Sarisa tells her that she has brought a list of promising candidates the scouts have selected. As Elfaria looks over the list, Sarisa tells her that the candidates of this year's festival are exceptional, but there is one that stands out among the rest for their ice faction. The one she's referring to is Julius, and from his stats, Sarisa believes he may even one day become Elfaria's successor as Ice Magia Vander. Elfaria admits that Julius certainly looks promising and he could become her successor one day, and that's only if everything reported about him turns out to be true. Down in the stadium, Vil squares off against Julius and his team, and victory goes to whoever is able to grab the crown first, so Julius could just grab it since he's closer, but he wouldn't be satisfied unless he brutally defeats and humiliates Vil in front of a huge crowd. Vil tells him that he has no intention of losing and readies his sword, so Julius begins his attack by casting a smokescreen. Vil can't see anything, but he can still hear the footsteps of 3 people around him, so he realizes that Julius and his team must be trying to surround him so they can attack from all directions. All of a sudden an ice ball comes flying at Vil from behind, so he jumps out of the way and begins running to make himself a harder target hit. Even with his vision blocked, he will be able to determine their locations from the trajectories of their attacks, so as 2 more ice balls come flying him, Vil believes he has determined all their locations and jumps in to attack Julius. However, as he does so, he is blindsided by a 4th attack. Vil gets knocked back and he doesn't understand where that 4th shot could have come from since he should only have 3 opponents, but his confusion only worsens as he looks over and sees that Julius and his team never even moved from their original positions. Yet Vil is sure that he was still getting attacked by Julius, but there are 5 of him now for some reason. The first thing that comes to Vil's mind is that this must be some kind of illusion magic, but the hits he has been taking are very real, so he soon realizes that the spell's weight too complex from his illusion magic. Julius just creating clones of himself, and he forgot to mention this earlier, but his clones also explode on command, and one happens to be right in front of Vil. So once Julius gives the command, it explodes and encases Vil in a thick layer of ice. This turn of events is certainly exciting, but the crowd is more focused on trying to figure out what kind of magic Julius is using. However, Edward and Werkner immediately recognized what kind of magic this is, and Werkner explains that it is one of the secret arts discovered by the gifted ice Magia Vander Elfaria. She created and mastered 12 unique ice spells, and Julius is currently using the first in the series. Ars Weiss is it spelled that creates icy copies of its caster, and Vil is furious that Julius would dare use his spell made by his Elfie. Julius just laughs and says his natural talent is what allowed him to learn the spell, as he was able to learn it by studying on his own. So even if it's only 1 out of the 12 spells, he believes he is now on par with Magia Vander, and that means Elfie isn't all that impressive, and one day he's going to expose her as a fraud. There are a lot of things Vil will overlook, but calling Elfie a fraud isn't one of them, so if he breaks out of the ice and charges forward to Julius to make him regret those words, but Julius uses his clothes to attack Vil with more ice balls. His clones move exactly how he tells them to, and they can use magic as well, so Julius can keep Vil busy for as long as he needs to. And not only that, once Vil's in position, Julius is able to cast a spell through his clothes that seals Vil inside impenetrable ice barrier. Once Vil is immobilized, Julius proceeds to cast a giant ice meteor and sends it hurtling straight for him. With nowhere to go, Vil ends up being crushed by the ice meteor, and the crowd begins cheering for his amazing strength. And even Edward has to give him credit for his outstanding performance, as he won that battle without taking a single step with his real body. With all eyes on him, Julius takes the opportunity to declare that his ice magic has become unmatched after acquiring one of Elfaria's spells, so he's going to make sure he becomes her successor as the next ice Magia Vander. Julius did all this just so he could show off his power to the scouts, and his claims certainly seem realistic, but it's going to be really embarrassing if he ends up losing this fight after everything he just said. In the next moment, Julius hears the sound of ice cracking, and in utter shock he turns around as the meteor crumbles to pieces and Will walks out mostly unharmed. Will thanks Julius for giving him a chance to cool off since he has a bad habit of getting hot-headed and impulsive whenever someone slanders Elfie's name, but he won't make that mistake again. Julius attacks again with his ice clones, but this time Will calmly evades the ice and appears behind Julius's teammates. Will then knocks the two of them out in one swift motion, and as he does this, Julius's ice clones crumble to the ground. From the moment he saw Julius's clone spell, he knew it was incomplete. Julius could use the spell briefly, but he was never able to handle the spell on his own for extended durations, which is why he and his teammates help him with the casting. If he needs to do all this just to mimic a fraction of Elfie's power, then Julius is nowhere near being a match for her. Unlike the Guardian, spells that act on their own, the ice clones must be actively controlled and they take a lot of mental fortitude to manage, something Julius clearly doesn't have. He needed the help of his teammates use the clones effectively. So basically, Will is calling Julius a fraud. Julius is enraged by Will's statement, so he tells him to shut up and attacks with some of his ice roses, but Will is easily able to slice through them all. However, as the roses hit the floor, they explode, creating another smokescreen and obstructing Will's view long enough for Julius to cast his ice clones again. All the clones begin firing ice balls at Will, but he's easily able to dodge the attacks regardless of the direction it's coming from. Julius hates to admit it, but what Will said about his clone spell being incomplete is true, and most he can manage his 4 clones at once, and without his friends to help him he has limited control over the clones, so the best he can do is remain on the defensive. However, Will should have no way of knowing which one is the real Julius because all the clones are a perfect image of him and his peak male physique, so Will will never find him. Never mind, Will found him. Julius has started him, so he raises a wall to defend himself from Will's sword, but Will cuts straight through it and sends Julius flying with a piece in his own ice. Julius doesn't understand how Will could have found him so quickly when all the clones are perfectly identical to him, but Will reminds him of the key difference. The clones are made of ice. The body temperature of the ice clones is the exact opposite of the body temperature of the user. This means they are pretty cold, and normally with good control the caster can prevent the cold from leaking out of the clones. Means Julius doesn't have that level of control over the clones, so the cold eventually caused ice to form under the feet of all the clones. Julius doesn't understand how someone who can't use magic knows the ins and outs of this spell better than him, and there's a simple reason for that. He's been friends with Elfie since they were children. They grew up in the same orphanage, so Will got to see her magic up close many times. He adored and studied it, but he was never good enough to catch up to her level of talent. That is why Will knows all the strengths and weaknesses of Elfie's magic. Julius tells Will to be quiet because he must be lying. Elfaria is a Magia Vander, and this spell is one of her secret arts, so how could Will ever claim to be able to beat it? He tries firing another ice shard at Will, but Will barely moves as he flashes away and Julius falls to his feet into defeat. Will says he respects Julius and his talent, and it's true that until now no maze has been able to replicate one of Elfaria's spells, but he's got some bad news for him. Elfie invented that clone spell, which was only 2 years old, so it's far from a perfect spell, and it's full of weaknesses that Julius is flaunting around like he is the next great mage. Julius is starting to feel really stupid because he thought he was an elite mage for replicating Elfaria's spell, but it turns out he has been bragging about copying the achievements with Toddler his whole time. This revelation caused Julius to break out a hysterical laughter as he realizes he has been grossly overestimating himself when comparing with Elfaria, but he still isn't going to let that stop him from defeating Will. Julius yells out in anger and summons 8 clones around Will. He laughs while saying that 4 clones aren't his actual limit, and for now he can just ignore his control over the clones and use the sheer number of spells he can cast to overwhelm Will. Will can tell that Julius is getting really worked up, and it's obvious that he is trying his best. But Will has already had to deal with 10 Elfie clothes bullying him when he was a kid, so 8 Julius is barely a challenge for him. As Julius casts the spells, Will runs forward while dodging and stabs one of the Julius clones right through the head. Julius sees this and realizes that could have been him, so these are now scared of what Will might do to him and is running away. Will continues to charge while destroying the clones along the way, and no matter what Julius throws at him, Will is always one step ahead and easily blocks it. Eventually, Will has destroyed all the clones, leaving only the real Julius, so to finish him off, he runs up with his fists clenched and punches Julius so hard that it has to be replayed 3 times. With this, Will has officially beaten Julius and everyone in the crowd being cheering for him. His performance has earned him a lot of respect among the student body. And while he may be exhausted, there is no one left to stand in his way, so all he needs to do is go pick up the crown and put it on his head. However, while he was busy figuring Julius, he failed to realize that Wignall's scheme had entered the stadium, so in a disappointing turn of events, Wignall is crowned the winner of the crown attack. Up in the magic tower, Sarissa tells Elfaria that the crown attack has concluded, but Elfaria can't bear to show her face for some reason. She asks Sarissa if there are any spells to rewrite the past or erase people's memories, and there may be something like that in the Forbidden Spells book, but Sarissa isn't going to let Elfie use it for such a trivial reason. Elfie is on the verge of tears because she didn't know Vul thought she was bullying him all those years ago. She is want to play with Vul back then, but now the whole school thing she was bullying him. Back down in the stadium, Vul accepts that he lost the crown attack and takes a seat to rest for a bit, and at the same time, Scion is glaring at him because he realizes that if Will was able to beat someone like Julius, then Scion needs to work harder before he could be a worthy opponent for him. Colette runs up to Will and she's glad he is okay, but Will apologized for failing to grab the crown after all the stress he put her and Scion through, but at least he was able to keep his promise to Elfie this time. The story continues. We see that night at the tavern everyone celebrates how Will defeated Julius. All the dwarves thank Will for fighting for them and Werkner thanks them for taking care of Will. The dwarves humbly say that they didn't do much, but Werkner still asks them to keep watching over Will. Later that night, Colette expresses her disappointment about Will not getting scouted by the tower. It's likely because their team fought amongst themselves, and they didn't even win the event. Colette blames it all on Scion, and Will explains Scion rudely rejected the invitation to their celebration. The old dwarf tells Will not to worry about not being scouted because he won the fight for their honor, and they got the apology that Will wanted. Best of all is that Julius is now doing work in the tavern as punishment. Julius does what his boss tells him to do, but he laments how he won't get scouted now because of the no talent of Will. Julius releases his frustration by working hard. Colette can tell that Werkner is concerned about something, and he explains that things might be different from now on. Will show the lot of what he is capable of during the festival, so he wonders how Will will handle things when he returns to the academy the next day. Colette assumes that the other students will have a newfound respect for Will, but Werkner warns that it might not be what they expect. When they return to school, some guys ask Will to come with them to the dungeon. They reluctantly admit that Will has ridiculous strength, so they begged him to choose their team for the upcoming practice. This practice is a week-long dungeon dive. Just then, another group interrupts them. They don't want another team stealing Will away from them, because they were going to ask him to join their team. Other students jump in, and soon Will swarmed with requests to join teams. Colette caused them all shameless for asking Will to join them even after years of bullying him. She assumes that Will feels the same way, but she is wrong and Will couldn't be happier to be wanted by everyone. Colette has completely lost him and she realizes that Will has been deprived of friends for too long. Colette gets accused of keeping Will alter herself and some girl offers to split the credits earned from the dungeon dive. Colette steps in to break them apart and says they Will can't team up with anyone because they have plans to go shopping. That night, Colette panics after getting carried away because it seems like they will not be going on a date. Her friend Rose teases her about it, but recommends that she get prepared even if Colette says it's not an actual date. Colette agrees with her, and Rose suggests that she wears something cute. Will tells Rosti about his plans with Colette, but he explains that Colette kind of persuaded him. She did this by saying that they need to buy equipment for the practice. Rosti is glad to hear that Will is going to be shopping along with Colette, and he smells like a creep. The next day, Colette waits for Will, and she's now determined to make sure this shopping get-together turns into a date. Colette is awed when she sees Will, and Will compliment her on her new look. He says that she made his heart race and she freaks out. Just then they're both surprised when Rosti apologizes for being late. Rosti introduces himself to Colette and Will says that he insisted on coming along. Colette is horrified by this turn of events and Rosti taunts her. From there on, Rosti gets in the way anytime Colette tries to interact with Will. Eventually Will notices that something is bothering Colette, so she points out that the closeness between him and Rosti is weird. Will assures her that Rosti is a good guy and he just likes to be close to his friends. Rosti brings them some drinks, but he didn't get one for himself so he could share with Will. Colette refuses to let that happen, so she offers to share hers. Tensions rise between the two, so Rosti tells Will that he can go ahead of them and get his sword fixed. Colette agrees and says that the dwarves won't be happy if mages like them show up at their forge. Will is completely oblivious to what's going on, so he just leaves to go to the forge. After he leaves, Colette comes right out and demands to know why Rosti refuses to leave Will's side. Rosti doesn't hold back either, and he explains that he cares about Will more than anyone else in the world. The two then go toe-to-toe, argue about who is closer to Will. Back with Will, he finally starts to wonder if his friends don't like each other. Just then Lehana comes out of nowhere to speak with Will. Lehana is known as Miss Perfect, a person who stands high above the mages and someone who's the exact opposite of Will. Will wonders what she wants, but Lehana just asks him to follow her. Will follow through all the way to some house, where Will sees the other top students. The final term of their last year in the academy means that it's time for the all-student practice, and the Lehana reveals that she wants to form a party with the 5 of them. Julius and Sion can't understand why Lehana invited Will, and Will thinks about how these are the 2 people that hate him the most. Lehana takes his terrified expression as a no, so Will realizes that she is an airhead. Sion refuses to just let Will ignore him, so he angrily goes to confront him. However, before he does, Wignall used this as powerful magic to change their entire surroundings. He points out that mages are not as barbaric as the dwarves, so Sion stops being a jerk. Wignall used illusion magic, which is a unique type of magic that summons fantasy landscapes granted only to the elves. Things start to calm down, so Wignall want to hear what Lehana has to say. Lehana explains that she simply wanted a formal party for the dungeon dive. She wanted to join the 4 strongest mages with the person who stood out the most at the festival. Will have something that they are lacking, and will help them in the dungeon. Julius doesn't agree because Will can't use search magic and Will just slow them down. Sion has been in a party with Will recently and he doesn't want to do it again. With no points out that they're just bitter after losing to Will, but Will is still insulted. Wignall explains what they refuse to acknowledge, and he says that Will has the brute strength of the dwarves and monster-like agility. Even though there is a much sophistication to his fighting style, Will's sword still managed to defeat both their wands. Julius doesn't take his words lightly and points out that Wignall's still behind Lehana in credits. This is just more of a reason to respect her opinion, so if she sees something in Will, then Wignall decide that he will just respect the no talent. This is more than he can save for the 2 other guys, and this gets them upset. Lehana reveals that she wants to use all their power, so she can go up the tower as the top student. She wants more fame and honor, as well as a better future for herself. Lehana was scouted at the festival and now has a guaranteed post-graduation placement, but that isn't good enough. In her house, members of her family generally die pretty young. To prevent their total ruin, Lehana must deliver overwhelming results. Ascending the tower won't be enough, because she must also become a Magia Vander. Lehana is sure that they all have ambitions of their own, so she tells the guys to drop a coin in a cup if they agreed to her proposal. Wignall instantly agrees because there will be no party capable of achieving better results than them. Julius wants more credits, so he doesn't have any other choice but to agree. Sion toss is in his coin as well, so this only leaves Will. Later that night, Will returns to his worried friends. They went looking for him by the forge, but he was nowhere to be found. Will is very serious and he reveals that he has decided to join the Lehana's party for the practice dungeon dive. The next day, Werkner explains that the practice will begin in 10 days. Floor 7 through 10 in the dungeon that were originally off-limits will be unlocked. This will allow students to fight over level 5 enemies and other high-credit monsters. This is the only opportunity. Students will have to earn more than 1,000 credits at once, so it's a really big deal. Most importantly, if students can defeat any of the floor keepers, they will earn a large number of credits. In theory, students might even be able to earn full practice credits all at once. Edward informs the students that there's also a chance that they will lose their lives. Even just last year, 4 students were eaten by monsters. He tells them to forget about playing hero, as recklessness is prohibited. Professors will be stationed nearby, but that hasn't stopped students from losing their lives before. As students entered the dungeon, Lehana points out that she never invited Colette. Colette doesn't care and just declares that she is going if Will is. Rosti wasn't able to go, but Will is happy that he at least prepared a lot of magic items for him. The practice is about to begin and students are informed that base camps have been set up on each floor. If the lower levels prove to be too dangerous for them, then students are told to get to safety immediately. With that, the practice begins and Will puts on his battle goggles. Elsewhere in the dungeon, someone was told to retrieve something in secret. There is someone else with him, and this person removes a person's head in their body in the most brutal way possible. Elsewhere, a guy named Cariot, who is known as the Flame Emperor's Wand, is told about the practice. Cariot isn't concerned about that, as he says that the barrier seems like it might be falling soon. Back with Will, the practice begins and Wignall launches the team forward. This sends them all off a cliff, but Wignall keeps everyone from meeting their demise. A crimson ant startles Will, and he's horrified to see that a whole swarm of them has appeared. Mages are weak when it comes to melee fighting, so Will determines that as the vanguard of the team he will have to act as their shield. However, Wignall stops him and reminds Will about Lehana's family reputation. Lehana springs forward and unleashes an attack that destroys all the ants. Wignall explaining to her family the Owenzas are a line of knights. Lehana herself is rare among mages because she specializes in close-quarter combat. Lehana has decided that competing for credits would be too much of a bother, so they would just advance faster than any other party. A look back shows Werkner giving a lesson to Will about what magic is most vital in the dungeon. It is not attack magic or defense magic, it is actually search magic. A common spell that detects enemies and abnormalities. It's very basic magic, but it's also indispensable for mages in the dungeon. Back to the present, an ant nearly eliminates Will, but Julius rescues him just in time. Will realizes that he can't sense enemies fast enough, and the others are using search magic to perceive a larger area than his senses can't. At this rate, everyone will destroy all the monsters before he even detects one of them. Just then Will is proud to have defeated one, but he is shocked when Wignall wipes all the ants out with one simple attack. Wignall calls Will a burden for not even being able to act as a shield, and he questions Lehana's decision to invite Will to their party. Lehana, however, is still very confident that Will just has ahead of time to access their shield. She is certain that Will will show his true strength when they face off against over level 5 enemies. Will feels tormented by her words, however, as she keeps qualifying her statements with the word probably over and over again. Julius starts doing something with his wand, so Will explain to us that mages use their wands to absorb magic traces that come from fallen monsters. This way the academy can check the number of targets a student has defeated. Everyone begins to leave, and they explain that there's no point in absorbing the remaining traces of the ants because they hardly have any value. Will is different from everyone because he has no way to absorb traces of magic. Because of this, he must log back monster means in order to earn his credits. This makes him more of a burden to the others, but Will stays positive as he vows to do his best to be helpful to his team at some point. Unfortunately, as their journey continues, Will keep realizing that there's nothing he can do. Everyone is so skilled that there's no time for him to cut in. It's unfortunate, but Will begin to think of themselves as just a pack mule. A while later, Lehana decides that they need to take a break. Sion doesn't feel safe in the spot she chose, but Wignall creates a wall of flames to help. It's just of an illusion magic, but it's enough to scare away the monsters. Lehana has Will distribute the rations she prepared, but Wignall is the only one that doesn't allow Will to get close to him. This is because elves was only allowed those that are worthy to touch them. Wignall stops Will in its tracks because he doesn't want to touch them by accident. Colette is furious to see Will being treated this way, but the only person Wignall deems worthy in their party is Lehana. Will says it's no big deal since the elves just have a different culture like dwarves. They are from a different world. However, the elves value their own kind over others, and they can be insufferable. Above all else, their talents are incredible. At the head of one of the Magia Vander factions is the Elven Queen. Lehana tells everyone that their top priority is Luminous Nabris. It is worth 110 credits and there is only one. This means that they will be slaying the floorkeeper of floor 10. 110 credits is an unbelievable amount and it's the most in the praxis. The monster is incredibly dangerous, but Lehana built this party for the purpose of slaying the Nabris. She is sure that the party has the power to defeat the 110 credit beast and she wants to prove it to the tower. Lahanna wants to fight the beast when their party has their full reserves of magic, so she wants to ignore the other monsters for now and get them after they defeat Nabarus. If no one objects, then they will take the shortest route to level 10. Vul can lie to himself about how scared he is, but he has only received 5 credits so far, so slaying a floorkeeper is the only way he can make up for it. Elsewhere we see that the guy called Headless has removed more heads from his victims. When our party arrives on floor 10, they start to see that several monsters have already been defeated. They wonder if it was another party, but that would be impossible. They took the shortest route and even skipped the base camps, so no other team could have gotten there faster than them. Vul studies the bodies and determines that no magic was used. These monsters were torn apart with brute strength alone. The team continues moving, but Vul wonders why it's so quiet. They eventually arrive at the boss's chamber, but they're shocked to find that Nabarus has already been defeated. Lahanna instantly tells everyone to use search, and Wignall explains the Colette that the monster's magic traces have been fully dissipated. This means that it was just killed. The floorkeeper had just been slaughtered, so everyone wonders who could have done it. Another look back at Werkner's lesson explains almost search is incredibly useful. It's still difficult to detect clever traps with it. Mages can use hide to cloak themselves with it, and there's a type of monster capable of evading search magic. Back with our group, Vul senses something and he wants everyone to be careful as he blocks the attacks from above. Wignall is instantly taken out, and this mysterious monster stops everyone from casting their spells. It makes the ground collapse, so Vul rushes to help them conscious Wignall. Everyone on all the other floors can feel the shaking caused by the monster, and they wonder what could be causing it. Vul manages to protect Wignall, but Wignall's arm is all messed up. Vul realizes that they're even further below level 10 now, which means they're outside of Academy territory. The others also realize how terrible this is, because floors 11 downward are tower territory. Only high mages are allowed to set foot here. Lahanna is in bad shape, but she has heard about this area. It's called the Nightmare's Maw, and it stretches down to the 15th floor. The monsters down here are on another level compared to all the other floors. Colette is with her, but they definitely need to regroup with the others. If they don't do it fast, then the dungeon will eat them alive. A look at Wignall's backstory reveals that he was tormented by the other elves for not being good with illusion magic, and for having to go to a magic academy with mere mages. He was a disgrace to his people and even told that he was no longer needed. He was told that his arm was talentless and it was removed. Wignall wakes up from the nightmare and he's shocked to see that Vul just defeated a giant snake monster all on his own. Vul offers to treat his wound, but Wignall reminds him that the no talent will not be touching him. Vul declare that even if Wignall ends up killing him for it, Vul can't just leave Wignall untreated. Wignall is incredibly stubborn though and just gives himself first aid. Things are not looking good as they have lost over half of their supplies. They have a total of 3 sub-weapons, including Rosti's magic items. Vul determined that the others are likely in the same situation and there will only be able to last for 1 day. Vul wants to look for the others, but the best course of action when stranded in the dungeon is to wait to be rescued. Vul disagree, however, because rescue will likely take a while, with that monster being on level 10. On floor 8, Professor Eliza explains to Werkner that a rush of monsters has destroyed her base camp. As for some of the other professors, something terrible has happened to them. Their lives were taken and something twisted their heads off. Werkner is horrified to hear that it's likely that floors 9 and 10 have also fallen into chaos. Werkner determined that none of this could be a coincidence, and he wonders if it was some sort of scheme. Edward arrives to explain that the practice has been cancelled, so the 2 professors go to help the students. Back with Vul, Wignall use of search out of fear that something is nearby. Vul suggests that he refrain from using it before he exhausts himself, but Wignall points out that they're on the 11th floor now. Monsters here are terrifying, and the 2 of them won't survive if they get ambushed. Wignall is both terrified and frustrated, so he can't understand how Vul can be so calm. Vul use this calmness to come up with a more efficient use of Wignall's search spell. Vul will calculate the distance they need to walk before reaching the edge of Wignall's search, so he will tell with no when to use search again. Vul and Kiki will take care of the close monsters that Wignall's search can't catch. As for Wignall, he will be in charge of finding monsters in the distance. They need to worry about ambushes the most, and they need to keep their fighting to a minimum. Wignall still can't understand how Vul can be so calm. Vul explained that in order to ascend the tower, he has no choice but to take credits by force. This led to him being stranded on different floors of the dungeon over 100 times, so he knows how to handle this type of situation. Just then the guys prepare themselves as they are surrounded by monsters called Jurgiza. They have no choice but to fight, so Vul decide that he will take point while Wignall fights the one in the back. Wignall drops his opponent quickly, but he is more amazed by Vul. Vul starts wrecking the monsters and Wignall can only wonder how Vul can move the way he does. Vul has always been put down by everyone around him, but he somehow managed to still become this strong. Wignall becomes even more upset because he reacted differently to his own situation. Just then Wignall gets caught off guard by another monster. There is no time for him to attack, so he decides to use his wall of flames to scare the beast away. Vul knows that it won't work though and the monster just runs right at Wignall. Wignall is completely frozen with terror but Vul quickly comes to his rescue. Vul explains that Jurgiza don't have eyes, so illusions don't work on them. Wignall begins to lose his mind as he laughs and calls himself a disgrace. Vul try to tell him that he's a very talented elf, but Wignall says he is wrong. Wignall has always called Vul a laggard because he has no talent. However, he reveals that he is one of the drags and a laggard himself. Another look back shows Wignall training and he begs for someone named Eleanor not to leave him behind. Wignall sobbed as he realized that whatever he was reaching for was just too far away and nothing he did would be enough. Wignall could never get himself to give up though, so he kept training. Back to the present, Wignall has just confessed to being a laggard. It's been 6 years since he and a group of other elves entered the academy, and he's the only one still there. The others have ascended the tower, but Wignall is a disgrace to his kind. This is because Wignall's magic is meant to give rise to something with the physical form. However, Wignall can only produce immaterial phantasms. His magic is all show if he can't actually defeat an enemy with it. Vul points out that Wignall is considered one of the top 3 at the school, but Wignall knows what's most importantly. Lahanna does as well, so she explains to Colette that only those who really prove themselves can ascend the tower. Over the past 6 years, she watched as the most talented students departed the academy, which made her realize that those that are left are truly the ones that nobody wants. Colette reminds her that she is known as Miss Perfect, but Lahanna says that's only in the academy. Lahanna witnessed firsthand what a true genius is like when she watches Elfaria rise all the way to Magia Vander. This is when she determined that those who were inferior can never hope to measure up to true talent. As for Wignall, one of his siblings was the first to teach him the despair of his own inferiority. Vul is shocked because the sibling of his is actually the queen of the elves. She is Eleanor and Wignall loved her very much. She was very small, so Wignall decided that he would protect her forever. However, it would eventually become very clear that she is a mighty elf, one powerful enough to even create great giant trees. Eleanor became a Magia Vander, so Wignall worked hard in order to reach her. However, he couldn't hide the fact that he was just a laggard, so he started putting down mages to hide his own inadequacies. Just then Wignall is shocked because Vul says that he knew they had something in common. Wignall thinks that he should try to make him feel better. He says that he's just been a hindrance, so he tells Vul to just go on without him. Vul refuses and assures Wignall that he's an amazing elf. He promises that they will get out of the dungeon together, so he will protect Wignall until he can work on his own. Colette gives a pep talk to Lahanna as well, and explains that she knows a boy who keeps striving even while being ridiculed for being talentless. If Vul saw how badly they were torturing themselves, Colette assures that he would laugh at all the way. Back with Vul, we see that he and Wignall are in the midst of a battle. They keep encountering over level 5 enemies, which makes it clear that the floor they are on is on a whole other level. However, Wignall can't understand how Vul is able to defeat every enemy they face in a flash. Vul finishes up whipping out the beast with these, and Wignall can only wonder how much endurance he has. Vul is all beat up from protecting Wignall, and Wignall can't figure out why Vul have them forsaken him like his own kind has. Just then Vul hears something, but Wignall search doesn't find anything. Vul knows what's going on though, and explains that the sound he hears is the sound of the dungeon giving birth to more monsters. This is exactly the case as a monster covered in flames appears. Vul instantly realizes that they are in danger, so he uses his magic items to destroy the thing giving birth to the monsters. They are still in trouble however, as the flame monsters called Balker are surrounding them. They are worth 11 credits and physical attacks do nothing to their flaming bodies. They are very resistant to magic, which makes them a natural enemy to mages. Even the tower considers them to be dangerous, and the only attacks effective against them is elven illusion magic. Vul determined that he can't defeat them alone, so he needs Wignall's help. Wignall reminds him that his illusion magic is defective, and he assured that he will only fail if he tries to fight. He is shocked, however, when Will explains that it's okay to fail. He says that they aren't geniuses, so the best way to move forward is by learning from their mistakes. Wignall fears that his failure will lead to Will's death, but Will assures him that he won't die. Will has a dream and he won't stop until he reaches the tower. This means he can't die, so he tells Wignall to mark his words. Wignall is stunned because the two of them have the same dream, but their personalities are completely different. Will takes on the powerful flame monsters, but it's pretty clear that his sword isn't having any effect on them. Wignall decides that he has to do something, so he attacks one of the monsters, just like he feared his attack fails, and he predicts that it's going to cause Will to lose his life. One of the Balker unleashes a powerful attack, but Kiki helps Will block it. Will once again encourage Wignall, and he tells him that he believes in him. This strikes Wignall to his core because his own kind gave up on him, but for some reason Will has a lot of faith in him. Wignall is finally done being afraid of everyone that tormented him, and he declares that Will's trust is the one thing he can never betray. He promises to never give up on his goals either, and he unleashes another attack. This amazing attack completely wipes out the Balker, but Will is shocked when he sees that Wignall is kneeling to him. Wignall apologizes for treating Will so poorly and acknowledges him as a warrior worthy of respect. Will decides to make a confession and reveals that he has always respected Wignall. With that over with, Will uses one of Rosty's magic items called the Seeker's Map. It creates a map automatically using its user's blood. Wignall is glad to see that they haven't just been wandering around at random, and Kiki has also remembered Colette and Scion's sense. Elsewhere, Julius becomes thirsty, so Scion tells them to just melt some ice to drink. Julius reminds him that they can't be wasting magic, but they just begin to argue. Julius thinks about how incompatible they are, but what's worse is that they were both humiliated by the no-talent Will. Julius uses search and doesn't find anything, but Scion can tell that something is wrong. He uses heat detection to detect a monster, and they realize that they're surrounded by evil sentinels. This makes Julius wonder if it has something to do with the monster they saw earlier. Scion confidently tells Julius he uses clones because even if he can't control them, they can still serve as decoys. Julius thinks he's crazy and suggests that they run away, but Scion refuses. Will made him taste the worst humiliation of his life, so Scion unleashes his rage on the sentinels. Upon the higher floors, students run for their lives as they are also attacked by sentinels. One student is about to get crushed, but Edward comes out of nowhere to rescue him, and he eliminates all the sentinels in an instant. He instructs all the students to evacuate to the 6th floor, and Werkner arrives to take him to the next area. The students are amazed because they never expected to see a racer in the dungeon. Werkner explains that the majority of students have been evacuated because not many of them managed to get past floor 8. However, one party did. This was Lahana's party, but Edward thinks it would be impossible to find them since floor 10 is too vast. Werkner reveals that he actually knows exactly where they are. He was the one who gave Kiki to Will, and she is connected to a crystal he has. Because of this, he knows that Will and his group are on floor 11. Down below we see that Colette is leaving signs behind. They have been on floor 11 for 16 hours now, and they're nearly out of food and water. On top of that, the monsters haven't been letting them take a break. Thankfully, Lahana is very strong and has been pushing them back, but Colette can tell that she is reaching her limit. Colette's surprised though when Lahana apologizes. She says that her ambitions got everyone into this mess, but Colette points out that the monster on floor 10 is the only one to blame. On top of that, Colette blames herself for tagging along even though she wasn't invited. Her words finally reached Lahana, so Lahana thanks her. Colette is actually very scared, but she can still be confident because she knows that Will save them. Just then she becomes excited as she thinks that she hears Will nearby. Elsewhere, Wignall senses a mage above the head, and they see the aftermath of Scion's rage. Wignall is incredibly shocked as he can't believe that he was able to eliminate so many sentinels all on his own. Julius, who has become the comedy relief, angrily tells Wignall that Scion didn't do it all on his own. Will is glad to see that Scion is still alive, but they're disappointed to hear that Lahana and Colette are nowhere to be found. Back with the girls, Lahana warns that something isn't right. The person that has appeared is Professor Bruno, but his head shockingly falls off. Another man appears and tells Headless that he's disappointed in him for letting students get past the 10th floor. Colette is absolutely mortified as Headless message with his new head, and the strangers start arguing about whose fault it is. Colette realizes that these guys took the lives of their professors, so she demands to know who they are. She nearly faints, however, when Headless destroys the head he is wearing. They explain that they're just regular old villains, who are trying to destroy the false sky. This terrifies Colette even more, because according to lore, if the barrier falls then calamity will descend. Headless politely asks for their heads and sends out an attack want to take their heads off. The girls are saved, however, when Vil arrive to deflect the attack away. Vil explains that they were able to find them because of Kiki and the stones Colette left behind. Their arrival only excites Headless even more, so Will tells everyone to run away while he fends off the strangers. Headless is incredibly powerful though, and easily knocks Will's back. Headless has taken a liking to him, so he decides that he will have to add Will's head to his collection. Unfortunately for him, his partner says that they're out of time and they have to go retrieve something. Headless gets dragged away, so he tells Duke to eliminate the students. Everyone is then shocked when they see the Headless just use the Mage Queen's secret transportation magic. Their shock turns to horror as they realize that Headless just summoned the monster worth 270 credits, the evil Grand Duke. And with that, we have come to the end of this part. Stay tuned for next part. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to receive all the latest updates.